Can you talk a little bit about the difference between an EDI protocol and an API protocol?
Well, it's the standardization of them, right? So, the example that I always give is anyone could take a look at at Shippo's shipping API, right? And within a day, start printing a label and using UPS or FedEx immediately. There's no like rigorous process. They've been able to standardize all of those carriers across, an end user who's using them, right? Um, EDI, like I said earlier, is specific. They're point to point relationships between customer and trading partner. Now, I think another way you kind of could ask your question is why does it still exist, right? And it exists because of the billions and trillions of dollars that the enterprise leaders have put into building their entire supply chains around this protocol. And then there's like a chicken and an egg thing. So if Walmart needed their 100,000 suppliers in the US to trade EDI, those suppliers have built their business on X12, right? And so now when they go to offshore some of their business to maybe like a ShipBob, for example, as a 3PL, they say, hey, ShipBob, our entire business now runs on X12 because we do Walmart Target. I need you to accept data via EDI. And so like you have the leaders who've built everything around it and their followers who have built their businesses around it because they rely on the leader side of the business.
That reminds me of the story that I saw of basically people asking why are train tracks, I think, 4.5 feet long. I don't know if you've seen this online going around, but the width of a train track is because that's the same width of what carriages were, and the same width of carriages were because that's what the roads were, and the roads were because that's what chariot was, and the chariot was that wide because that's what two horses side by side were. And so you have all these kind of legacy things that just kind of keep going, and it sounds like for better or for worse, we're stuck with EDI. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're building a business on that idea, but we're also building it on the data, right? So, like I said, when I first got here at Orderful, I had the same opinion that you did. This was anytime you brought up EDI to anyone, they just had a visceral look of pain on their face. But until you like dive into the numbers that the industry is growing from 5 to 20% year over year, depending on the category, that's not a dying protocol. And then the other thing, the reason I think, you mentioned at the beginning of the call, everyone is talking about it is because I think of what's happening in the economy over the last 2 years. So when I was in the direct to consumer world, it was a very valuable time to be in the direct to consumer world. Everybody was buying from digitally native brands on Shopify and BigCommerce on WooCommerce. Well, in 2022, that was no longer the case and money was tighter around the world. And when money's tight, where do families buy? They buy from Target, they buy from Walmart, they buy from Walgreens. And all of that is built on EDI. So those companies that wanted to reach direct to consumer on their Shopify store need to find other avenues to be able to essentially stay in business. And those avenues are B2B, and the way B2B is sent and received is EDI.
Yeah, I've said for a long time that D2C is where you build your brand, but retail is where you build your business. And so many brands that we're talking to today are just, if they weren't in retail, they're talking about how they're going to get there, and just the economics are so different. Kind of as a side tangent, if you and I were to start a retailer today, and we had the scale and we could do it, would we be forced to use EDI, or could we say, you know what, we want to take an API regime, and we're big enough that eventually people will give up their EDI addiction and they'll spell a different three-letter acronym?
Yeah. So I think like maybe if we had started Huckberry, if you're like familiar with that marketplace, right? Like they're my favorite marketplace to shop online. So when you look at when you go to their store, you see that like CC Filson, for example, is a company that they sell a lot of stuff. Peak Designs, right? A lot of those those brands, but specifically with Filson, if they're going to trade with someone, it's most likely going to need to be EDI to receive that order. And so we could pivot and say, hey, all of our suppliers, you just accept Jonathan and Aaron's API, and that's how you're going to trade with us. Except we don't want to hamper our ability to expand our business. And if we want to work with suppliers or wholesalers that have diverse products, that have great unit economics, we've got to be able to have our own X12 standard, in my opinion, to scale the business.